Hello, hi, welcome back to my channel. Still continuing with my catch-up wrap-up. So I feel like I still have like a bunch of catch-up wrap-up coming up, at least 5 of those videos, I think 5 or maybe 6, I don't know, but I'm just gonna do it slowly at my pace. I'm currently reading something really nice right now. Okay, it is this book. This is There Is No Such Thing as an Easy Job. I bought this in 2021. How do I remember that? I was actually diligent enough to put my name the front page here. And I put where I bought it, which was in Batu Pahat, a town here in Malaysia. I bought it on 11th of December 2021. I remember it was like a solo trip that I had to Batu Pahat, which was, it was an experience. It was nice. I got some books. This was one of it, and 4 years later I started reading it. Oh my gosh, this book is incredible. I am enjoying it so much right now, but I'm not going to talk more about it. Why? Because I'm only like 50% into this book. But let me just say that this book is about the working experience. I bought this book when I was still working as an engineer, and I kind of wonder if I had read this book at that time, would my opinion about this book be different than what I feel about this book now? Because I am unemployed at the moment. I'm like an unemployed student. Speaking of which, I'm gonna start my doctoral program soon, so okay. Anyway, let's talk about books. 3 books this time. Okay, so I'm gonna start with this one. Okay, why is the video... Oh. Okay, I'm gonna start with this one. This is by Gabriel García Márquez. This is called Memories of My Melancholy Horse. This book was originally written in Spanish, translated into English by Edith Grossman. So this book was written sometime in 2004, I think. 2004, published in 2004. And I had high hopes for this one. Why? Because I enjoy, in general, writings by Gabriel García Márquez. I first read his work when I was 17 years old, and that was 100 Years of Solitude. I went into that book purely because I thought that the title was dramatic. And I've never read anything like that before in my life at that time, and so I was astounded. I really enjoyed the magical realism. I really enjoyed how very much like soap opera the story was. It was so dramatic, and since then I was really excited about works by Gabriel García Márquez. That being said, I still have not read a bunch of his other stuff, so those are coming in the future. But I finished this one in June, I think, or July. I think it was June, and this was a small book. And yeah, so basically I had high expectation for this one, but unfortunately I was kind of disappointed by it, because of reasons that I'm going to talk about. So what is this book about? Memories of My Melancholy Horse is about this one guy who is approaching his 90th birthday. This guy is kind of like a second-rate journalist. Professionally speaking, he has not reached like something really amazing in terms of professional achievement. And at the same time, in terms of his personal life, he has not had like really meaningful relationships with women. romantically. Most of the time he has been sleeping a lot with prostitutes, and so his relationships are kind of just really fleeting and all that. So overall, this guy who is approaching his 90th years on earth is feeling that his life has been like really hollow. So he decided on his 90th birthday he's going to do something different. He's going to hire a prostitute, an underage prostitute, which is something. So he ended up doing that, and basically the story just kind of like takes off from that decision. So basically, we readers would see what will happen between this man and this old man and the underage prostitute that he hires. And throughout the story, this underage prostitute does not really get a voice. So much so that I think it feels kind of intentional on the part of the author to make this prostitute a mostly silent character. And I feel like there's a lot to discuss from that aspect of this book. But another part of this book, which I feel is kind of bizarre also, not bad per se, it's just a little bit bizarre, is that I feel like this book has some kind of resemblance to that kind of storyline of in which a character sort of regains hope for their life. Some kind of a new lease on life kind of plot line. And this book has a bit of that element in it as well. Albeit with this somewhat of a perversion, sexual perversion injected into it. Now, the reason why I was not particularly satisfied with this book was because there is something about it that I feel is just kind of missing. The fact that it is short could make this book be something that is quite punchy, and I feel like with the length, with the amount of this book, with the length of this book, with the length of the story in this book, in a way, it sort of succeeds in conveying what it wants to convey, but I feel like as a reader I want something more. Now what I feel that it conveys is that one is probably it is giving us a story of a person who is able to sort of find something new in his life, like getting some kind of refreshed outlook on his life after years of thinking about how bleak and hollow his life is. So basically, the stereotypical new lease on life. But aside from that, I feel like this book is also giving something that is much heftier. The fact that we have a underage prostitute character who is pretty much silent most of the time, probably to me kind of gives me the impression that this book also comments a little bit on how the current culture, how the contemporary culture views the idea of femininity and also youth and silence and beauty, and how all of these things sort of intersect with each other and how they are perceived through a heterosexual male gaze, which is kind of represented by the old man in this book. And of course there's that kind of perversion in it that kind of makes it uncomfortable for readers, and definitely anyone who feels that this relationship can be triggering, this is something that you should pay attention to before reading this book. But at the same time, I also feel like it doesn't go deep enough. The story feels like it just stops kind of suddenly, and it doesn't seem to provide that strong enough of an emotional punch the way that his other novels did for me in the past. So yeah, I guess this one in particular is a bit of a dud. But anyway, I still have more by Gabriel García Márquez to read on my shelf right now. In fact, I just got one. I forgot what it's called. But yeah, I just got one. So, and I got more at home in Kuching. So I'm excited about that. But anyway, that's all for Memories of My Melancholy Horse. Let me know what you think if you've read this book. Next one, I want to proceed with something totally different. This is a modern YA contemporary novel. This is Akata Witch by Nnedi Okorafor, a Nigerian American author. And this book was actually a buddy read that I had together with Lindy of Lindy's Magpie Reads. And this book, at that time, when I was reading it, I later learned that it was also a part of a series. So, what is this book about? This book is about a young girl who was born in the United States, I believe. Her name is Sunny. She moved to Nigeria when she was a young teenager with her family because of the nature of her father's job. So she moved to Nigeria and she goes to school in Nigeria. But because of her identity as someone who is from America, she is facing some kind of difficulty in in socializing in school. Now, on top of that, Sunny also has a physical condition. She has albinism, and therefore, physically speaking, she is sort of set apart from her friends at school, which makes socializing an even more difficult thing to do. So in general, as a teenager, Sunny does face a certain kind of challenge in school, and at home she also faced some kind of challenge in terms of a very, very strict father. Now, while all of this is happening, while Sunny is sort of navigating the tough life of being a teenager in a country that is sort of foreign to her, she also finds out that she has innate magical abilities that is very much rooted in West African folklore. And so, yeah, basically, it was around this time also that Sunny encounters two friends who are familiar with this whole magical world thing, this magical world universe, and together they sort of get into some kind of adventure in getting to know more about their magic, about the world, and basically the story focuses on Sunny's personal adventure in discovering who she is as someone who has this certain kind of magic, and how this magic is also tied to her family and her culture and all that. So I thought that this book was kind of cozy. Like when I was reading it, it was a book that I could read very fast, because it is in fact a YA contemporary, and so in terms of language it was kind of easy to read. And the feeling that I got when I was reading this book is sort of similar to the feeling that I get when I'm watching a relaxing movie on a weekend, a relaxing family movie on a weekend, which to me brings that kind of warm and cozy feeling inside. And I feel like this book, the story in terms of the world building, the way that it crafts the the magic system that is very much centered around West African culture. I feel like it's quite vividly done. There is you can see that there is care being taken into crafting something that is intricate, but also logical in its universe. And at some points, I could actually feel like myself being transported into the universe. And because this book also has mainly young characters, there are certain moments in which, you know how it is, like, I usually read books that are very much focused on adult characters and realistic situations. But sometimes when I read something that is more rooted on fantasy, there are certain parts in which you feel like you're experiencing something vicariously. And that was also something that I was able to experience once in a while I was reading this. And I also kind of like how this book just kind of venture into heavier topics, and especially how it explores the concept of death. In this novel, it is particularly quite strong to me, and I could only imagine, like, if I were at an age, which was the target age of this book, probably like 10 to 14 years old, I think, I would probably feel that this book was kind of heavy, but at the same time it was heavy at the right amount. But yeah, those are the interesting part of the books. Now, because this book is also part of a series, I think there is a bit of a disappointment on that front. When I was about to finish this book, there was actually a climactic scene, or rather a climactic section towards the end of the book, which the entire book was trying to set up. So basically, there's this evil character who is like hunting kids in this book, and Sunny and her friends have to sort of equip themselves with enough magical knowledge and skills in order to combat this evil bad guy. And so towards the end, they have this kind of like battle scene. Now, there is something about this battle scene that just feels a little bit anticlimactic, because we have spent such a long time setting up the gravity of this threat. But the way that it is treated towards the end feels a little bit like it ends on a whimper, and feels like this book is mostly written for to set up the next installment or the sequel. And indeed, there are certain plot elements in this book that aren't really addressed, because I feel like they are only going to be addressed at the next book. So in that sense, I feel like it's a little bit of a letdown, because I'm not much of a series reader, but even if I were to be interested in series, I would prefer for a book to really be able to stand by itself and to address certain things sufficiently, while keeping things interesting for readers to look forward, to the next part. But I feel like in this book, there are certain parts that feels unfinished. It feels kind of obvious that it is setting up for the next book. So that part was a little bit disappointing. But anyway, I thought that this book was kind of okay. I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. I think I'm going to turn on another light. Okay, now that it is brighter, let's start with the last book of this video. Alright, so this is Väinö Linna's Unknown Soldiers. This book was originally written in Finnish, translated to English by Liesl Yamaguchi. So this book, let me just kind of check. I think it was published sometime in 1954. So it has been published like quite a while ago, I think at least 70 years. And this book is kind of considered as as a classic, one of the classics in Finnish literature. And I feel so happy to have finally finished reading this book. When I first picked up this book, I had this vibe that I was going to like it. And indeed, when I finished it, I really liked it. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. But this book was also a challenge for me to read. And before I talk more about this book, what is it about? Unknown Soldiers is about a group of Finnish soldiers who are fighting the Soviet Russians during the Continuation War, which is kind of like a war that was going on between Finland and Soviet Russia sometime in World War II. And the entirety of this book takes place all the way until the end of the Continuation War. And so we're focusing on a group of Finnish soldiers. They come from different parts of Finland, and they all just kind of like end up fighting as a group. And throughout this novel, because it is a war novel with people fighting, you're gonna see some characters dying. But basically that's the gist of it. We're following this group of men as they are fighting their enemies, so to speak. And yeah, that's kind of like the simple description of this book, and basically that's what it is. But what makes this book so nice? But first of all, what makes this book so difficult for me to read? I picked up this book last year, actually, and I think I've only read like until like a third of it, and I was like, you know what, I could not continue. I could not continue this book because I thought it was so depressing. It was depressing in the sense that while you're reading this book and you're following like this group of Finnish soldiers, and you basically just see them like dying one by one. And the way it is written is it feels just kind of like so bleak. And I think it was also because of my external circumstances at that time that made it easy for me to feel depressed by certain things. And so it was difficult for me to read this book. But even at that time, I couldn't deny that I actually enjoyed the writing style. It is written in this like really casual, conversational tone through this third-person omniscient point of view. So basically, we're just kind of like being led by this omniscient narrator who takes us and let us know better all of these soldiers, all of these Finnish soldiers who took part in this war. And they all have different personalities. And maybe that's also why it makes it easier for me to feel depressed reading this book at the time. Now, fast forward a few months later, I read this book again at the beginning of this year. Not the beginning, I think it was like sometime in March. No, in April, I think. I started reading this book in April, and I finished reading this book in June, sometime in June, I think. Ooh. Basically, the thing that made me stop reading this book, it continued happening. but something about that just made it kind of irresistible to read. The way that this novel is, it is very good at humanizing its characters. We see different kinds of personalities among this group of soldiers, but somehow we root for them. And what's interesting is that at the same time, even though they are fighting against the Soviet Russian, we are not led to think that the Soviet Russians are the bad guys. Like, even when there are Soviet Russians fighting them, even when they feel negatively about their, the Soviet Russians as their enemies, we as readers, or at least I as a reader, I didn't feel that the Soviet Russians were like the true bad guy. This book, it is very obvious that it is staunchly an anti-war novel. From the way that it describes the soldiers, with how it focuses so much on the minutiae of the soldiers' life when they are not fighting. The way that this novel focuses so much on the humanization of the characters makes it feel like the war that is going on in the background feel super, super absurd. And the general structure in terms of the action in this novel that I could sort of notice is that it kind of alternates between periods of fighting and non-fighting, and then fighting, non-fighting. So during the fighting, we're obviously going to see a lot of actions, a lot of fighting actions, a lot of people dying and stuff like that, getting blasted and shot and whatever. Yeah. And then it is during the non-fighting section of this novel that we get to know more about the characters in this book. Now, to be honest, there are so many characters in this book, I couldn't really remember them like off the top of my head, like very, very clearly who's who. But, I only remember the feeling that I had from this novel because I finished it like a few months ago. But it is through this section in which they are not fighting that we really get to know them. And it is through this part that we feel closer to these characters. We really see the human side of these people, how they feel about the war, how they feel about each other, how they feel about the enemy, how they feel about so many different kinds of things. And then the war happens, and some of them got killed. And then after that, they stop fighting for a while, a bit of a respite, and then they fight again. But yeah, this novel really takes the time in making sure that the readers feel close to the characters. And I think that is like the strength of this book. Now, something else that I really like about this novel is something that happens towards the end. Aside from the fact that it feels, once in a while this novel would be kind of like being kind of sarcastic about war and people who abuses power, who uses their power to further their agenda and all that. Another aspect of this novel that is kind of very obvious towards the end is that there is something that feels somewhat whimsical about this whole story. Now, this is a novel in which so many people die, yeah, but the way that this novel ends, like, I don't want to tell you how it really ends, but the way that it is written, there is something that kind of harkens back a certain sense of innocence, a certain sense of dreaminess, which makes the entire experience that all of the soldier characters have had, and therefore by extension the experience that readers have had since the beginning, the entire war, the entire fighting and all that, feels absurd in comparison. So yeah, I really enjoyed this book. When I got to the ending, I was like so satisfied. Yeah, it is a great novel. Okay, I highly recommend this. Yep, really recommend this. Now, another thing I want to add is there's something that I just sort of some kind of a I wouldn't say a concept or whatever, but some kind of I don't know, idea or something that I noticed in some of the more recent books that I've read, like maybe before this or much later. But there's something about this book that I feel is kind of like elegantly masculine. Like, it is masculine, like 90% or more than 90% of its characters are men, but there is something about the characterizations of these characters feel very elegant. Now, I suppose you can interpret that as however you want, but best if you pick up this book and read it. So, with that, I am going to end this video because I feel tired. So I will come back in another video later with 3 more books, and I'll see you again at that time. So until then, take care. Thanks for watching. Let me know if you have read any of these books and what you thought about them. And yeah, take care. I'll see you again. Bye bye.